How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital.
That's difficult to answer.
the end. There's a noise inside my head of crying people facing death. Is this the end? Is this the end? I'm burning in the there's no place to hide. I'm burning in the this is the final time. What have we done to the world? What have we done to the world? I'm burning in the there's no place to hide. I'm burning in the this is the final
What up, everyone? Happy Monday. Super chat from Trendlin. I am so happy. I'm no longer part of the LPCA XCOM, but I'm still on the LNC. Well, being on the LNC in and of itself is, it's a certain kind of punishment, Trendlin. I don't know why you do this to yourself. For people who don't know, Trendlin is on the Libertarian National Committee, which basically means she's on the board of the Libertarian National Party. And up until a couple days ago, she was also on the board of the Libertarian Party of California. And, it might sound like a good thing. It might sound like, hey, I get to actually make decisions and do stuff. But from my perspective, having been involved in libertarian politics for 2 years before retiring, Trendlin is doing the Lord's work. So congratulations, Trendlin, on no longer having a leadership position in California. I'm sure that feels really great. And I'm sure it'll be even better when you're off the LNC and, we can still drink and laugh at them and all that stuff from a rather detached perspective. But congratulations for you. Yeah, it's a the Libertarian Party, as you guys know, is highly functional. Everyone gets along. No one ever backstabs each other or pulls constant bullshit and power games, and it's like a well-oiled machine, the Libertarian Party. That's why it's running out of money and totally failing right now. But we don't have to talk about that. We don't have to talk about the sorry state of the Libertarian Party because I'm retired. I am not involved in libertarian politics, and I will never be involved in libertarian politics again unless something dramatic changes. I mean, I suppose we should never say never, I suppose, but I learned a lot in my 2 years involved in libertarian politics, and I'm good. I'm good. I'm good. I don't like wasting my time only to be shit on constantly. And they can do whatever they want to do, and they can post whatever tweets they want, and I don't give a F. Anyway, so what did I spend this weekend doing? I spent this weekend getting the flagship project for the Center of Left-Wing Studies set up. And the really exciting part of this is we are now able to accept volunteers. And by we, I mean me. And, because this is my project. But we are going to be building out a volunteer-based organization, hopefully someday raising enough money where I can actually pay people and bring on a staff to do all the things that I need them to do. But you got to start where you got to start, and we are starting here with a volunteer-led effort led by me, supported by your donations to the Center for Left-Wing Studies, which is my new nonprofit. So I now have, one of my goals for this year was I wanted to set up my for-profit arm, which is Red Menace Media, which includes Decode the Left. It includes my publishing company. It includes all the things that I do to, keep a roof over my head and so I can do all this stuff with you guys on the internet. So we have our for-profit arm over here. A couple months back, I kind of thought, well, why don't I just develop a nonprofit arm so that people can give me really high value, not like tax deductible donations, and I can also accept grants and that sort of thing. Because the thing of it is, in the last 5 years that I've been researching the left, I have amassed a massive amount of primary source evidence. And I've always wanted to do a big archival project where we're basically making all of this primary source data about the left in America available to the public, organized in a really beautiful way, helping us to do research and analysis and track different leftist groups all over the country in real time. And so I've always kind of had this in the back of my head, and I just didn't know exactly how to do it. We tried a couple things. We tried a wiki at one time. That didn't really work out for a lot of reasons. But recently I've kind of had some epiphanies about this, and we have now set up, or I have now set up, a nonprofit called the Center for Left-Wing Studies. Now, it's kind of funny because conservatives are really confused about this. Conservatives are so confused about, Karlyn, why did you call it the Center for Left-Wing Studies? It sounds like you're promoting the left. Well, no, conservatives. The reason that I called it the Center for Left-Wing Studies is that I am basing it off of the Center for Right-Wing Studies at the University of California, Berkeley, and I'm making fun of them. It is a satire in the form of a nonprofit. And so that is why it's called the Center for Left-Wing Studies. And no, I'm not going to change the name conservatives just because your feelings are involved in it. I don't really care. I've already got a logo, man. The ship has sailed. I already have a kick-ass logo. We already have a website. It is the perfect name. It's not going anywhere. Just because you are confused, that is not my problem. Yeah, no, they can't. No. So my big goal for this weekend is I needed to get an automated system set up to help us with our first big project, which again is something I've been talking about for a minute, which is mapping the modern left. And when I say mapping the modern left, I mean a literal map. This is at leftwingstudies.com/map. I will put the link in the chat. You also should be able to find it from the homepage, but there may be some caching issues that I was experiencing earlier, but it'll be there eventually. Anyway, what we are doing, there are going to be 4 main projects involved for the Center for Left-Wing Studies. One of those projects is called Mapping the Modern Left. And this is what I spent all weekend getting set up so that you guys can come and help out with this, so we can really start kind of like really building it out. We are going to be doing a couple things with Mapping the Modern Left. Number 1, we are going to be creating a giant fuck-off database. That's the technical term for it, a giant fuck-off database of every leftist group that we can find in the United States. And that's important for people to know, because people have been sending me stuff from like Canada and Australia. And it's not that I don't appreciate that you guys have socialists in Canada and Australia and the UK and other places too, but I have to start somewhere, and I'm an American, okay? Yeah, it's the GFD, the GFD, the giant fuck off database, the GFD. So we're going to be building a giant database with all these organizations, and we are literally going to create maps of these organizations. Because my kind of thought process is that, I get asked all the time, Karlyn, how many of these people are there? How many of these people really are there? This is just a couple of people, right? How many of these people are there? And I've always kind of wished I could say, do you want to see how many people there are? Here is a giant fuck off map of the leftist groups in the United States. Now, you guys are looking at a very sparse map right now. Don't let this fool you. This is just the first 50 entries. Okay, because I had to start somewhere. I had to get the system working. I had to figure out how to work it myself. This is about 20. What you're seeing on this map is about 25% of the total chapters for the Democratic Socialists of America alone. This is just the Democratic Socialists of America, and this is about a quarter of the chapters that they have set up all over the country. And so that's where I decided to start, just to get the system working and to get it functioning the way I needed it to. And so I've been working on just getting the chapters for the Democratic Socialists of America in there so that when we start scrolling over the map, we can go to, hey, Chicagoland DSA. We've got all their info right there. We can head over here, Hartford DSA. You know, we can find there are two. Did you guys know there are two different DSA chapters in Hartford, Connecticut? Two different chapters. Who would have thought? We've got the DSA national chapter, all their information. So the whole point with this is that I'm basically creating. I actually do, because Donnie Girl's here. We've got Hawaii. Hawaii represent DSA Hawaii. There you go. So the whole purpose of this is I'm basically creating a sex offender registry for leftists. That's what it is. I'm creating a giant map of all the different groups. We're going to be able to filter the map based on groups. So we're going to be able to look at maps like just of the Democratic Socialists of America, just of the Revolutionary Communists of America, just of the Party for Socialism and Liberation. We're going to be tracking everything. We're going to look at radical revolutionary bookstores. We're going to look at publishers. We're going to look at mutual aid networks. We're going to look at unions. We're going to look at like every queer psychotherapists, whatever category we want. We can map them into this database. And so this is actually going to be, and also they not only get mapped onto a map, they also get added to a list down here where we can sort by different categories. Say we can sort by national organizations. The DSA is the only one in here so far. We can sort by state. So if you want to see all the DSA chapters in Colorado, here's your Colorado list. We're going to be able to sort by all these different categories as well. So there's not that much data in here right now, which is why you're not seeing that many options, but it's set up. It's alive. And basically the way I have this set up is that I've created a way for people to be able to volunteer. And basically I give you access to a form and you fill out things like the name and the and the location and the websites and all that stuff, all the basic categorization stuff. And I'll teach you how to do that if you want to volunteer for it. And you hit submit. And when you hit submit, it automatically gets added to this map, and it automatically gets added to that table, and it automatically gets added to our database. And this is a data entry project. This is an information management project. And it's going to give us some really cool data and some really cool information. So we've got that up and running. That's what I've been working on all weekend. If you're interested in volunteering for that, you can head over to the Substack, which is Karlyn, Karlyn.substack.com. And I will put this link in the chat. Now, there are two ways right now to get involved with the Center for Left-Wing Studies. One of those ways is to volunteer for data entry, helping this out. But I need to be really careful with this in that the only people who are going to be allowed to enter data in this project are people that I have trained, people that are familiar with my work, people that I know what's going on, because I'm not interested in just creating the most giant database of all the information. I actually want the information to have integrity. And if you're just coming in, if you're new to my work, you might not be able to provide me with what I need right now for this, because I need you to be able to look at data and actually understand what it is. And oftentimes people who are newer to my work don't fully understand what they're looking at yet because you're newer. Now, if you're newer, that's okay. We can train you up and we can teach you stuff, and you can come to streams, and I've got classes people can watch and all that stuff. I'm not saying you can never volunteer if you're newer for my work, but you have got to become familiar with my work before you're able to volunteer in the way that I need right now. And I'm being very strategic about this. And I'm being very militant, and some people might get their feelings hurt because they think they're ready to do it. But I'm going to look at their knowledge level. I'm going to say, no, you're not quite ready yet, but you need to go do these things, and then maybe you'll be ready. Okay. So if you're not quite ready to be involved directly in the data entry yet, that's okay. You can still hang around. You can still learn. You can still help us spread the word. You can still help us do other things. Maybe you can even help us research. That could be something that goes on, but you're not inputting the data directly, because we need to maintain a very high degree of data integrity for this. And I'm just going to be militant about it, that there are only going to be people that I approve and bless that are putting data into my database. Okay. So if you want to get involved with that, I have no. I've already had this conversation with people before. You probably weren't here. Notification. No. AI makes mistakes all the time. I use AI for a lot of my research. I use AI for a lot of my analysis. I can do that because I know every single time AI makes a mistake. And then I can go in and manually correct it because I'm not just putting stuff into AI and then pumping that out as content. I use it for data analysis, but I'm able to tell every single error it makes. AI makes a ton of mistakes. There is no universe in which AI is getting anywhere close to this project. That's not going to happen. Not unless I manually approve it all. Because again, it's like AI is awesome when you are a subject matter expert and when you can keep the AI in check. AI is not awesome when you're just automating everything. That's fucking lazy. I'm not doing it. That's going to result in horrible data. Let stupid conservative shills like Data Republican on Twitter use AI. That's all they're doing, by the way. You guys know this Data Republican account that like all the congressmen follow, all the Twitter people follow. They're literally just putting stuff into AI, and the AI is spitting out information, and it's not always correct. Data Republican has gotten stuff wrong multiple times that they won't admit to because they use AI for their analysis. How do I know they use AI for their analysis? Because I also use AI for my analysis, so I know exactly what the AI says, but I'm also able to correct the AI, whereas Data Republican doesn't know what the fuck she's talking about, so she has no idea what to correct. So no, we will not be using AI. Final answer. And that's just going to be the way it is. See, I'm not anti-AI. I love AI. I think AI is incredible. I think AI is incredible as an editing tool. I think AI can be incredible as a research tool. I think AI can be incredible as like an analysis tool. I think it can help draw connections that you may not have thought of before. I think it's great in so many ways. However, AI makes a fuck ton of mistakes. And so I can't have that. Like once you start corrupting data, it just all goes downhill from there. And so I would rather build out all my stuff much slower and make sure that we have a very high level in data integrity than to build it out a lot quicker and to have a very low level of data integrity. So that is what I believe there. So if you want to get involved, you have to join the Center for Left-Wing Studies Discord. So I have set up a separate Discord. I know I have like 15 Discord nows, whatever, but this has to be separate because it has to be just for the nonprofit. It's just the way it goes. And so I have set up a Center for Left-Wing Studies Discord. So if you want to join, if you want to be involved, head over to this post on the Substack and you can join the Discord directly. You're going to have to answer some questions and stuff like that before I give you a membership role. There's not really a ton of stuff in it right now. I basically wanted to create a place for volunteers to meet, and I have a little bit of like information about how to do the data entry, but there's not a ton in there right now. And so, but make sure you get into the Discord and we will work it all out on the way. Yeah, well, guess what? You're not running my nonprofit and you're not running my research. So I'm no offense, bro. I don't really care. I don't care. Don't care. All right, so that is what we're doing there. You can find the link also to volunteer. Why isn't it showing up? Why? You know what? Chrome has a caching issue where it doesn't show up new pages. But if you go to leftwingstudies.com/volunteer Chrome, you will be able to find the volunteer page if you want to find it on there rather than on my Substack. I'm lying about what? We already have an asshole in my chat who's disrupting things. I saw you running your mouth. Let's just see what you have to say, new person who I've never heard of before. Let's see what you have to say. Do you have any channel activity at all? Oh, looks like you've already been timed out on my channel before. So let's see. Let's see. People say you're full of shit you're not for the people. You're a perversion of society, not the whole bullshit. Is this even English? Here, I'll even try to read this in a normal voice instead of what you sound like in my head, which is a screeching, whining loser. People see are you black? People see you're full of shit. You're not for the people. You're for the version of society, not the whole bullshit. You must be black, bro. You must be black. There is no universe in which you're not black. You want people to sacrifice that's not the right there, their own beliefs aside, but other people, it's okay. Very confusing and subjective, not for the greater good, but what you decide what is good, asshole bitch. You got to be black. There is no way. There's one in the chat if you guys think this guy's black. I'm lying about this. Okay. So why should we care then? You shouldn't. You're far too stupid to be here. You're far too stupid to be here. Like yes, black. I told you. I fucking told you. No offense to smart black people, but your low IQ retards, like, they're so identifiable. Bro, you don't even know how to spell. Go away. Go away. And by the way, I'm not being racist. I'm just stating facts. He was, in fact, I said he was black, and he did, in fact, turn out to be black. And if you're a high IQ black person, then I'm not trying to be offensive. I'm really not. High IQ black people are welcome here. I don't care if you're black. I care if you're a low IQ retard. Yeah. You know, there are always losers who bring down the bell curve. Indeed. So that's what's going on with the Center for Left Wing Studies, guys. If you want to get involved, you can head over to the website and sign up for that. And I'm really excited about this. Thank you guys for all the interest so far. Thank you to everyone who's already donated to the Center for Left Wing Studies, where you can make tax-deductible gifts. If you want to, just go to the give button. You can find out how, because you guys allowed me to do things like buy security plugins and make sure the data is all protected and make sure backups are running on the website and buy all the tools I needed to get started. So thank you to everyone who's made early donations for the Center of Left Wing Studies. I have spent your money well, making sure our data is protected and managed really well on the back end, which might not be the most exciting thing in the world, but I have a feeling at some point the left is going to get pissed off and they're going to start trying to attack my website. And if the left does get pissed off and starts attacking my website, I have backups running all the time, so we never actually lose any data. And I've got a top security structure for it, so they're not really going to be able to do everything. They might be able to take it down for an hour or two, or they might be able to fuck around with it, but guess what? We're just going to be able to reload everything, and so we got everything backed up 19 ways from Sunday, because that's the boring stuff you got to do when you're doing projects like this. But I appreciate everyone that's allowed me to do that. It's been awesome so far, and I'm really enjoying this project. And it was because I was working on this over the weekend that I found the video we're going to watch today. Because there is another project with the Center for Left Wing Studies called the Gender Cult. The whole idea of the Gender Cult is that I want to go and find these queer studies departments and these queer research centers that exist at universities all over the country, but many people haven't heard of them, but they're pumping out all this crazy research. I want to basically go make a database of those and monitor them so that we can get ahead of all this queer stuff as it's coming out of the college and university system, so that we know what's coming next and we know what the students are being taught. If you think Trump's gotten rid of all this stuff, you are absolutely delusional. He has not. It's still happening all over the place. And so I have a couple other projects with the Center for Left Wing Studies that I was working on this weekend, just to try to figure out exactly how to do them. As part of that, I went to Yale's website, Yale University, and I started doing some research. And wouldn't you know it? I ended up, because I was researching queer stuff at Yale, I ended up finding this person, Linn Tonstad, professor of theology, religion, and sexuality at Yale. Oh, hello. Hello, new friend. See, these are the types of treasures that we find when we're just researching what colleges and universities are doing related to queer. This is a queer theologian that is a professor of theology at Yale Divinity School. I'm pretty sure this is going to be about as good as we all think it's going to be. Now, I immediately tweeted that out, and I found some other pictures of this person too. In fact, let's just go here. Here are some better pictures of this person, just so we can get a good idea of what we're dealing with here, because I know the other picture may have been smaller. And I also did find this person seems to be into interpretive dance. And there are a couple interpretive dance photos. This is a professor of theology at Yale Divinity School. They, them. Yeah. So I think that this is going to be all it's cracked up to be. And then I found out this person wrote a book called Queer Theology. You can't make this stuff up. It's just like, if I was trying to craft a character as part of a play, it's like, can we get any better than this? I just don't know that we can. And then I found out Mizakan's already read the book, Queer Theology. Of course, Mizakan has already read it. So here's what it says in that book. The task of theology is to deconstruct a moral order which is based on a heterosexual construction of reality, which organizes not only categories of approved social and divine interactions, but of economic ones. Theology, in short, is about sex, money, and God. Theology is about bodies meeting bodies, and where bodies meet, also images, representations, imaginations, fantasies. Bodies are sustained by money, and what money can buy, bodies are threatened by the lack of money or what money can pay for. For Altus Reed, all theology is sexual theology, all theology is economic theology, and all theology is implicated in the socioeconomic and sexual agenda with which it emerges. Altus Reed clearly recognizes the dual status of the normative subject as both fictional and destructive. Heterosexual women need to come out of their closet like everybody else, speaking the truth about their lives, heavily domesticated by patriarchal definitions of what it means to be heterosexual, monogamous, faithful woman with a motherly vocation. Does this sound like queer Marxism that we've read a million times before? Does this sound like queer Marxism to anyone else? Sounds like queer Marxism to me. And so I started doing some searching for this person, and I found just 2 months ago, they, them was on a podcast in which they, them was talking about queer theology. And so I thought we would watch that just to see what's going on. They've done some other podcasts too. Queerness isn't inclusive and church shouldn't be either. Let's see, what else? Queerness and Christianity. Oh, I bet that's going to be fun. Queer theology. Faculty conversation challenging unjust laws in church and society. That's actually on Yale Divinity School's YouTube channel. So lots of other stuff from this person, but we're going to start with this, and we're going to watch this, and we're going to talk about what it means. Before we get into that, guys, I just want to make a quick announcement. We have a spy stream tonight. Now, there's actually 2 spy streams scheduled at the same time. So Pete, I think Pete's in the chat. I saw him earlier. Pete suggested a spy stream, which I think was a good suggestion. However, there's a better one at exactly the same time. So around 7:45 tonight, and Mac B, I am highly conscious of the fact that your movie night is also tonight. At 7:45, we are going to be gathering for a supporter-exclusive spy stream. We are going inside a DSA organizing meeting. As you guys know, the DSA is running candidates all over the country. They are running candidates for local office. They're raising a bunch of money. We've seen them talk about that explicitly. And so we're going to go inside an organizing meeting for the DSA, and we're going to listen to what they're doing, and we're going to talk about it. And that's going to be around 7:45 tonight. After that, you guys can all join Mac B in the supporter Discord, where he is watching a James Bond movie later tonight. I think he's watching Goldfinger later. So Mac B, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's going to be a nice little back-to-back. We're going to do the stream right now with the queer theology queer person. We are then going to do a spy stream, and then we're going to go do movie night with Mac B. And that is going to be what we're going to do. Oh yeah. They have a new program called Socialist Cash Beats Capitalist Trash, which is a national effort organized by the National DSA, and they're raising a ton of money. They're making phone calls. They're raising a ton of money that way. Local candidates are going out and doing door knocking. They're raising a ton of money that way. DSA funding is going up. It's not going down. They're very excited about it. We did a spy stream. Was it last week we did that spy stream? May have been the week before. Pretty sure it was last week, though. Which one is he? No, Goldfinger, Mac B, which movie? GoldenEye. Thank you. I knew it was gold something. GoldenEye is what he's watching. There you go. All right, so we'll be doing the spy stream at 8 p.m. You still have plenty of time to head over and get signed up as a supporter if you want access to it. This is only going to be a supporter exclusive. If you're a supporter on Locals or Substack, obviously, or Patreon, Twitter subscriber, YouTube channel member, you will be allowed to come to the spy stream. You can find the link on whatever platform you are a supporter on, and I'll look forward to seeing a whole bunch of people in a couple hours when we start that, but we're doing this first. So, let's get started. Hope you guys are having a good Monday. There we go. There we go. There we go. All right. We are watching Queer Theology. Everyone, please make sure you mount the like button for me. Everyone, please make sure you are subscribed to the channel if you are not already. Let me just get my little setup here. I will turn the chat on the screen so you guys can see your comments. And let's learn about Yale Divinity School Queer Theology, guys.
Hey, Hannah.
How are you?
I'm fantastic. We're at Yale Broadcast Studios. We are launching into another Leaders Way podcast episode.
At Yale Broadcast
So
Studios.
I'm happy.
That's great. I'm excited because Linn Tonstad is our guest, and because
Me
Linn
too.
Tonstad is the most fashionable theologian I know. I accessorized.
Wow.
You did. On camera for the first time, you are representing.
Just wearing a hat. But you know, that's how much this is me being extra.
It's
one
strong.
extra
It's strong.
accessory.
And you know, I know sometimes you've said that, you know, you didn't go to Yale.
That's true.
And you
That's
wonder
true.
if you really can wear the blue.
Am I a Yaley? Does Handsome Dan really love me? These are the questions that keep me up at night.
Yeah. Well, I think to anyone seeing you in the hat, I think you can call yourself a Yaley.
Okay.
No, Linn Tonstad came in full creative regalia.
Yeah. She's given interviews about like the fashion of a theologian before. It's just amazing.
I believe it. And
can
I
only
was feeling
aspire.
a little plain today, which is fine.
Oh, wow.
Plain is a different that I think we can embrace. Can we?
Yes.
We can.
Yes.
Yes.
Absolutely.
It's also, you know, end of the semester.
Semester.
Are you grading papers?
Not yet.
No.
The exams are on Friday, and then I will be grading papers.
So I am grading some papers right now
Oh.
in our Preaching for Creation
Are
class.
they homilies or are
They're
they papers?
not.
Oh.
Professor Karlyn Sharp, shout out to the
Woo-hoo.
wonderful Karlyn Sharp, has assigned a piece of spiritual creation-based memoir as the closing assignment.
Whoa.
So folks are reflecting on their relationship with God through nature.
Very
And they've
cool.
been really moving reflections.
Aw.
It's like candy.
That's really great.
Yeah. Not like Swedish fish, though. Not that
Stay
kind of candy.
tuned. I love when assignments are fun to read like that, or really get at the sort of growth and development that people are undertaking during their degree programs. It's so fun to read.
Well, I made a rather radical comment to my students.
This is so fucking higher education. This is so NPR and like dry. This is like NPR chic right here.
As class was coming to an end, I said, please print out the assignment and like stick it in your bookshelf or put it where somewhere in 20 years you'll stumble upon it. Because I don't know, how many Google Docs have we created in the last 10 years, right?
There's a Google Doc graveyard.
There's it, right? We're just going to lose track of all these things. And
where memoirs are not raw memes.
Wow. I thought, is she going to do it? And she did. I'm
Wow.
so happy and
you guys are
entertained.
so
that you
smart.
did. So, students who are listening, print something out that you're proud of, tuck it away so you can find it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. Well, let me introduce our listeners to the one and only Linn Marie Tonstad. Linn Tonstad is professor of theology, religion, and sexuality at Yale Divinity School, our colleague. Professor Tonstad is a constructive theologian working at the intersection of Christian theology with feminist and queer theory. Her first book, God and Difference, The Trinity, Sexuality, and the Transformation of Finitude, was published in 2016. And her second book, Queer Theology Beyond Apologetics, was published in 2018. It was also recently translated into French. Ooh la la. She joined the YDS faculty in 2012, and she teaches things like Christian theology, queer theory, philosophy of religion, and theological method. She's a superstar. She's a powerhouse.
Superstar.
She's the kind of person we would have zooming into Cambridge to give a paper. I mean, the one, the only, the renowned, drumroll, Linn Tonstad.
Hi, I'm Brandon Nappy.
Hi, I'm Hannah Black, and we're your hosts on the Leaders Way podcast.
Wow.
A Yale podcast empowering leaders, cultivating spirituality, and exploring theology.
This podcast is brought to you by Berkeley Divinity School, the Episcopal Seminary at Yale.
What are the chances that this is not the only cringe episode of this podcast that's being produced by Yale? What are the chances that if we went into other episodes, the other 53 episodes of this podcast, we would find things that are maybe even better than what we're watching? I stop by this channel every once in a while and I still can't believe this stuff is real. Yeah. Yeah, common thought. Yep, common sentiment.
Welcome to the Leaders Way podcast, Professor Linn Tonstad. This is a treat. I've heard Professor Tonstad give papers like when I was in Cambridge, you would zoom in and give papers and at conferences and things like that. But it's rare that we've been actually in the same room together, even though we're colleagues.
Although we have theoretically tried on some occasions.
True.
So this is actually the culmination of quite a long process.
Yeah.
a big moment for collegiality.
The voice is bugging me out. How did they get that voice? This is a dude, right? I was not expecting that voice, and it's going to freak me out the entire rest of the show.
So we have theoretically tried on some occasions.
True.
So this is actually the culmination of quite a long process.
Yeah.
A big moment for collegiality.
So good to have
Doing
you
this.
here.
I can't tell.
So a lot of our listeners,
Is this a man or a woman? I can't tell. Does anyone know? Is this a man or a woman? I honestly don't know. I just don't know. I don't know. We don't know if this is a man or a woman. Oh no. We found Pat as a professor at Yale Divinity School and a queer theologian.
for collegiality.
So good to have
Doing
you here.
this.
Yeah.
Exactly. So a lot of our listeners probably already know what queer theology is, and many of them probably don't. So I was wondering if you could kind of give us an intro, like what does that even
What does it mean?
How can queer and
question.
theology go together?
Good question.
Yeah, and I probably have a pretty particular take on this
Yeah.
as well, because I see part of my work as providing an alternative understanding of queer theology to a lot of what people think it means if they think it has a reference. So, most typically it's taken to be the kind of theology that's concerned with the inclusion of LGBTQIA+, et cetera, and classic embarrassed, et cetera, people into the church, and with the kind of making of theologies that allow for that.
Okay, someone decided to use AI. Let's see if you guys agree with this AI assessment. Linn Tonstad is a woman as indicated by references to her using she/her pronouns in biographical descriptions, and her full name including the typically feminine middle name Marie. Pop quiz for the chat. Does that mean this person was born a woman? So again, so to the point earlier where someone told me to use AI and I was like, no, we're not using AI. No, we aren't. Does that mean that this person was born a woman? No, it doesn't. It doesn't mean that at all in any way. Thanks, Rebel Yell.
I have a different, I think, understanding for a few different reasons of that. But I'm very interested in queer theology as one of the ways that one might think about what in human sociality, which includes but is not restricted to political and other kinds of questions, economic questions, what in human sociality could be different? And what would we do to make it different, right? Which is quite a real fundamental structure and challenge. And the kinds of queer thinking, I work in particular with a less sociological and more humanities theoretically oriented side of kind of the queer theory that has been part of what has fed this thing called queer theology. And so I'm very, very interested in visions of transformed sociality that do not see negativity and antagonism as bugs, but rather as features. I also think a lot about the way that, queer theology comes out of a history of people creating socialities despite, or in some ways, within and in relation to the experience of abjection, the experience of finding what one likes or oneself despised in various ways, rejected, condemned, pilloried, mocked, etc., etc. And so for me, queer theology is, among other things, a way to think very hard about these questions. It does for me, and this is a place where people disagree, it does for me benefit from retaining a certain focus on questions of sexuality and to a significant extent gender. But it's not so much about what it includes or doesn't, because all ways of thinking sociality can be made to have a relation to all others. It's about asking these more challenging questions as I understand them, and about how the kind of restriction of permitted relationships has, social functions that might also be theologically undesirable as well as politically problematic. So that's one way of talking about it, right? Like it's about how difficult it is to live with other people.
Well put.
So but you could also talk about it.
What they them is talking about is they them is talking about different forms of social relations. That's essentially how they're defining queer. Queer is a form of social relations, changing the way in which we relate to each other. This is because far leftists believe that capitalism is not just an economic model. Capitalism is a cultural model, the ways in which we relate to each other. This is part of the reason they want to abolish the nuclear family, because they want to create queer ways of relating to each other that don't socially reproduce capitalism, which is what they believe the nuclear family is doing. And so that's essentially what they're talking about. For people who can't follow this, they're talking about how do we relate to each other as human beings, as individuals, as part of a collective, as part of a polyamorous queer throuple, because we're rejecting the nuclear family. How do we relate to each other in a spiritual context? This person is a queer theologian, so they're going to be talking about transforming or transcending normative theology in favor of something that probably has nothing to do with what Christianity actually is, but it is a fundamentally different thing.
Terms of the kind of, thinking seriously about God's transformative work in the world. You can think of it in terms of one of several ways of challenging.
Oh no, you fell for more conservative bullshit. Oh no. They don't have babies. They deport all their babies. Pop quiz for the chat. Do queer Marxists have children? You think queer Marxists don't have children? Not only do they have children, they have an entire child care program set up. Socialists have ways of having children. They don't abort all their babies. They don't hate their family. That's not why they want to abolish the family. So no, they absolutely have ways of reproducing themselves.
making overly central of certain investments in gendered and sexual structures that has arguably been typical of Christianity in the 20th century,
Gendered
where you sort
structures.
of take these matters and make it as if the gospel stands or falls on having the right views here, which is a tragic restriction of Christianity.
Mhm.
Wow.
Well, and then what happens is when you do have that very kind of entry level question of what arguments do we have for and against inclusion of queer folks in the church, there's this scaffolding that's not actually necessarily central to Christianity, but that is obviously going to fall apart if we do include people we haven't included in the past as an institutional church. But then that scaffolding was not supposed to be the main thing. It just became too precious or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's right. I think the only place that I'd also want to say is that in the relevant senses that matter, queer and trans people have always been
True,
in the
true,
church,
true.
right?
Yeah.
Now, there are so many ways to hear that statement the wrong way, as
Yeah.
if I'm claiming that these are trans historical realities or realities that are naming something across cultural difference and other ways of organizing human difference. And I'm not intending to say any of those things. It's just to the extent that we're talking about this thing, I do think it's important to note that the idea of a Christianity without this is, of for various reasons, a bit of a fiction.
And I think the way I just framed that exemplifies that reality.
Yeah, I
saying,
think
like,
in your second
well,
part, you're saying exactly,
we haven't included these people in the past. Well, they've been there.
Yeah,
It's just we're telling ourselves that there's been a history of exclusion, at least to some extent.
Well, and also that inclusion or exclusion is the significant question. But of course, the question of inclusion always invites the question, inclusion into what? Right?
Well, and you used two words that I'd love to hear you say a few more words about, and it includes one of my favorite words, which is also a word I scratch my head about a lot, and that's transformed. You talk about a transformed sociality. I'd love to hear you say what you mean, maybe by those words apart, and then what happens when you put them together.
Well, the main thing that I think about in that regard is, what would it look like to have a little less violence? Because no matter how we might differ, and I think we really do in various ways, about what we think the best ways of living together might be, and so on, to what extent we could be dramatically different than we are, or to what extent we could just be a little different than we are, or to what extent we think certain kinds of...
Hang on, we got a super chat from Vinyl Pilled. Pretty sure the jawline is one of a man. See, that's kind of what I thought too, but the voice is throwing me off. The only thing missing here is a 5 o'clock shadow. At least it's looking to me. That's I'm just not sure, but I do appreciate the super chat. Thank you.
Of change are meaningful or just sort of superficial, all of that stuff. I do think that, without wanting to make any universal claims whatsoever, very many people do have a sense that we could be a little less violent.
Yeah.
And yet we struggle amazingly to be a little less violent. And right now, when we're in a period globally of a kind of different self-conscious living in history than has been the case for a while for certain segments of the relatively less dramatically precariously situated, parts of the especially Euro-American populations, meaning this geographically rather than ethnically. We're experiencing this seeming intractability. The only thing you learn from history is you never learn anything from history. And you're like, but how come you don't see it? You don't see what's happening. You don't see what's coming. And then you undergo this shift and you're like, because you can't know in advance which form it's going to take this time. And in fact, some of the attempts to describe the form in advance may end up affecting its arrival. And yet at the same time, when it happens, you're like, oh, this is that thing, right? And so again, what are the kinds of, let's say, resilient social structures that might allow for, again, what are the practices through which we could try to respond differently in relation both to the trajectories leading up to the kind of heightened geopolitical tensions that we're currently facing, and might help us act better inside them?
Okay, I have a question for you. And it's selfish in the sense that I think about this a lot, and I just really want to hear your take. Do you think that our theology of suffering is linked to the way we understand violence as Christians? And do you think, in your estimation, like a better theology of suffering would lead to less tolerance of violence?
No, I don't think so.
Oh, tell me more.
But I think there's a connection that you're seeing that I might not be.
The way I'm kind of seeing this mapping out is there's feminist theory and queer theory and maybe sociological elements. And then there's theology, and A plus B is spitting out C, which is this vision of a better world. So that may or may not be right. But if that's what we're doing, what's the theology that's involved in the project? Is it about the Trinity? Is it about suffering or human nature? Or am I totally getting this wrong?
No, I mean, for me, let's see, what is the theology? There are probably some motifs that I think are more generative than others. So, the desire for the different and the significance of that.
The desire
ways
for the
that different
different.
parts of the Bible and the history of Christian thought have quite a range of approaches to questions that might be organized under matters of finitude, for example, or human limitation, human embodiment.
This is a professor of divinity at Yale Divinity School, and they're talking about Christianity. So what do you think? Obviously, they do claim to be Christians. Yes.
The consequences of human embodiment, the real kind of questions that embodiment generates. Like some other scholars in this area, I've also thought a bit about how does the way that these traditions think about food have something to do with the ways that these traditions think about embodiment, including sexuality and relationality. And what's the theology? The theology is about, does God want the creature to live, and does God want the creature to live with other creatures? And if so, hey,
bro, I don't fucking know. I'm not a Christian. Google it. Look it up. I don't know.
Finite and fallen worlds, or however you want to play that, right? What does that actually mean? That seems to me to be quite an essential theological question.
All right. We need to have a chat, Christians. We need to have a chat. Your feelings about what Christianity is don't matter. Your feelings, I need every fucking Christian to take your feelings and wrap it up in a little box, and I need you to put it in the corner. The point of this exercise is not, do you believe this person is a Christian studying and practicing based on your Christianity? That is not what we're talking about. What we are doing is listening to this person to find out what they believe, to find out what they're teaching, to find out how they see the world. Your lived experiences don't matter here. And I understand there's probably going to be a lot of Christians with feelings. And I understand that you're all going to want to say, they're not a Christian. They're not a Christian. They can't be a Christian. They're not a Christian. I'm a Christian. They're not a Christian. I understand you're all having fucking feelings right now. I don't care about your feelings. If you want to talk about your feelings about this person being a Christian, go to church and talk to the pastor or talk to the priest or whoever you want to talk to at the church. This is not the right place for it.
Right. And one that, like many theological questions, all our ideas of how things work ought to be tested in our paying very careful attention to what's going on around us. Right.
Yeah, blessed are the feebles. Yeah,
that's
exactly.
Maybe the part that I think we don't talk enough about. And that's the kind of thing that lets students come into my classroom talking about the differences between theory and practice, which I find just absolutely heartbreaking.
Right.
And an incredibly limiting way of constructing a problematic. when you want to know if something makes a difference, one, try to look for it. Two, try to practice it.
Yeah.
See what happens. Don't imagine that concepts walk around the world by themselves, or
Totally
that's what it
categorically
is to
different.
think,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Thinking, as I never tire of repeating, is a bodied practice in every sense. And yeah, so, one we do with other people and in conflict with other people.
You noted the question before, what are the practices that get us to this place where we are hurting each other just a little less? And I wonder how you think about that. Obviously, scholarship and teaching is probably a big part of your practice, but as you sit with students, how do you enumerate those practices? Because often these questions sort of stay in the abstract, right? But I presume unless we're actually thinking and doing simultaneously, we don't get to the place of a little less violence.
Well, I have a couple of answers, I think, that are of different kinds. One would be to be raised Seventh-day Adventist, as I was, is to be raised with a belief that you are the one who will be persecuted.
Yeah.
Which heavily affected my sense of how I ought to think about questions of persecution, even if I now believe differently around that, that question in certain ways. I still think there's something there where if that's the direction from which you're seeing things, you might have a somewhat different attitude than if you understand yourself as a majoritarian participant or practitioner. Another would be, if I was describing in the abstract, one of the practices, like a category of practices that I truly believe in, it's something like practices that are rewarding and bring you great joy, but that you cannot have without something, and maybe in particular people, that you do not feel that same way about being part of them, right? So that you experientially have a tie between, this is something that really matters to me, that's important to me, that's fun, meaningful, however you want to play that. And I can't have the thing I want without the thing I hate. I think there are ways in which that's also part of the key, one of the key elements of why certain queer socialities became such generative sites of thinking for so many people.
How did you come into this work? You're growing up in Norway, and then fast forward, boom, Yale Divinity School professor Linn Tonstad with the famous books. What happened that you even encountered the queer theory to pair with theology?
That's a good
and
question.
do this really generative work.
And can I add a layer of question here too? For those who might not be as familiar as a Seventh-day Adventist, can you give us a little thumbnail sketch of what that world might have been like in Norway, at least for you?
One answer is absolutely I cannot, which is part of what it is to be from a world like that. But one brief way of saying it, Adventism is very international. So I had parents with very different national backgrounds. My mother is from Baghdad and grew up there. My parents met just outside Beirut. My dad's Norwegian, et cetera, et cetera. They did some of their schooling in the United States. So that was a feature, right? Like a very transnational understanding of who you were, and very much a small minority in Norway. I think when I was growing up,
encountering difference there already that you're having to wrestle with.
It depends how solidly you build your institutions.
Very interesting.
Which was part of what got me thinking about what it takes to maintain any different way of life, because I
a more
saw,
porous.
I saw the work that went into making certain choices the default, right? Producing encompassing spaces of life so that you could at least theoretically order them the way you thought was right. And however I might assess some of the details of that now, for me, it did feed a lot of the way I came to ask questions later on, because I had sort of seen up close the kind of commitment it can take to do things even a little bit differently than people around you do. And I was very interested in that. How do you generate that commitment? How do you generate that desire? How do you, in a certain sense of seduce, right? How do you entice people in, right? And then I also, another way to describe a Christian story, right, is that we will be different than we are without being different than we are. And we
Yeah.
were different than we are without
Yes.
quite being different than we are. And isn't that an interesting story,
And we're
right?
back to the mystery of transformation.
And also, in a certain sense, it stays,
stays the same,
it's
yeah.
completely different
Yeah.
and yet stays the same. So that's a very interesting, right? That's a very
Yeah.
interesting way of thinking about what it is to live as the kinds of animals that we are.
Yeah.
And I'm interested in a wide range of questions around that. And I think what has made queerness, and we're only recently in a place where we distinguish queer and trans as rigorously as we currently do, but these have been people who have created, not across the board, but in many cases who have created
not really
social
said much
worlds
of anything. Well,
in which it was possible and maybe even
they them is talking about social relations. They've already talked about abolishing gender. They're talking about transforming social relations within these institutions, but it's kind of like the same basic stuff that we've heard a million times before. But let's just, we'll see where it goes.
standard or expected to live differently. I tell the story often these days because it's forgotten by so many. Coming out did not used to mean coming out of the closet. Its reference is coming out into the life, into a kind of life with other people.
Yeah.
That's how that phrase first circulated. And the ways in which I love that, right? And then you have this tragic situation that is also a key origin story for particularly queer theory, which is that people who had, no idea in a certain sense that this is what was happening, died for intimacy, right? And were taken to be, by many, the suffering victim who must be eradicated, right? Or who cannot be embraced, who cannot be touched. And how thinking happens out of an experience like that also seems very important to me, because as the COVID-19 pandemic, with its ongoing devastations of so much in ways that we mostly can't talk about for a variety of reasons, the question of how close we can be with others, the question of how to live with a completely uncontrollable vulnerability that is built into not just our body's susceptibility, but our bodies themselves. We are co-made by viruses. That's quite a challenging, right? A lot of our practices have a lot of difficulty allowing for that. There's questions here too of how we think about the relationship between things that are features that in some way can.
I'm going to start banning this from my channel. I'm going to start banning people complaining about vocal fry. I'm just going to start banning it, because do you know why you guys do this, where you complain about this? I don't damn vocal fry. Like, you're just trying to give yourself an excuse not to listen because you don't like it and you're miserable. And it's kind of juvenile and I don't like it. The whole point of this channel is that we listen to the left. We listen to the left even when they annoy us. We listen to the left even when they're boring. We listen to the left even when we don't want to. And if you don't want to do that, you don't have to be here. There are plenty of other places you can go on the internet where you will find content that is low IQ, clickbait, very exciting, probably fast cars driving and police and, owning the libs bullshit and explosions. You can go find that low IQ bullshit elsewhere.
To be changed, even if they can be differently approached. What we can and can't control, what we make political and not, where we draw those lines. And these for me are, again, closely connected to these other questions. What does it look like for us to live a little less violently together?
This reminds me a lot of the way Adrienne Marie Brown thinks about sci-fi and imagining the future, and the way you're speaking of queer theology. It's not about just taking down the proof texters and living to fight another day. It's about casting a vision that's not just a critique, it's a fulsome vision for living together. Yeah.
I wonder what it's like to be a teacher and to be a professor and to be with students and to walk with them at varying levels of transformation. I presume some of your students are fully on board and maybe finally they're in an academic setting where someone sees them, or there's a theology that honors their full dignity. Others are on the fence, I suspect, like, what? Yeah, they're wrestling. And then maybe others, I don't know, you tell me, who go in ready for a fight. They come from these more traditional backgrounds. So take us on a journey through the kinds of students you're working with, and what's it like to have a front row seat to their grappling and reckoning with maybe something that's new for them.
Well, I mean, they're the makers of the field going forward. So that part of it, just I feel incredibly lucky to get to be someone who can give them access to an array of resources that they might not have easily found in that way elsewhere, and say, here are some things I think are interesting to think with. What do you do if you think with these and then move on to other things, right? And so there's that. But, you know, most students do come into my class expecting something different than they get, of course, right? And, you know, the kind of experience that generated my little queer theology book was, of course, oh, Professor, I do see why you are critical of apologetic arguments that say it's okay to be gay and Christian, in effect. But, you know, since they're the only thing that works, you know, and even though my argument is, among other things, that they don't work, or at least not in the way that one thinks they will.
Yeah.
But also, right, they're expecting a kind of affirmative approach in various ways. And I have that, but I place it very differently. I do not engage with the proof texts in that way, because that concedes far too much.
Oh.
I am absolutely not willing to have this debate on that level. For me, even agreeing to do that gives up more than I'm willing to do.
How would you characterize what that concedes?
Yeah.
It concedes the deciding rights to other people, among other things, which I just think is absolutely unacceptable. It concedes that the right way to debate around these questions Christianly is from the yes or no direction. It presumes an outsiderness to queer and trans Christians that is simply descriptively false, among many other things. It also has what I would consider a challenging to defend relationship to biblical texts, and in various ways, possibly even more challenging relationship to different kinds of historical difference. And I just also think that most of the arguments, even ones that I think are on their own terms, on their own merits, relatively successful, not mostly interesting. Yeah.
Are students ever surprised at how much you love not only queer theology, but also the super dead, crusty white men of theology? I think that surprised me about you.
Who are the favorite crusty men?
Schleiermacher?
Oh,
No?
yeah. I love that man. I love that man. You know, I visit his grave somewhat regularly, believe it or not. But
what do you love about Schleiermacher? It's been a while. I think the Christmas Eve sermon is probably the last.
It's stunning.
It's stunning, stunning. And of course, when I remember reading it, and my professor just ripped it to shreds, and I thought, well, okay, but this is really quite beautiful, actually. But tell me what you love.
He's often very badly read, so there's that too. You know, there's really almost generations of scholars who were trained to read him exclusively through a certain set of lenses, partly connected with Barth, of course, and who didn't take seriously that Barth kept Schleiermacher as close as he did for a reason. So there's that side. But
and it's true. He's often like, and if you want to feel feelings, there's Schleiermacher.
But then here's why you shouldn't really feel feelings. They really don't matter.
Well, but and Schleiermacher, you know, he is very much a thinker of sociality, right?
Yeah.
Very obviously. He's a thinker of inadequately in some ways, you know, history and development, but it's important that they are as central to his thinking as they are. he's also somebody that I think you would take to parties, and I think that's quite unusual in a theologian.
That would be a fun game, like a ranking
gosh.
game. Who would you pull up to a party with?
Oh, I'm writing it down for our next fun together. Yeah.
Well, I just think many of us are not the most charming party guests. for various
Gregory of Nyssa
reasons.
would have been terrible at a party.
Oh, that's interesting. Maybe, yeah.
Unless he got really angry.
Well, I mean, I have a high tolerance in some ways, I think, for the person in the corner at the party who's remember, a happy outcome is you watch someone die. That's the best possible thing that comes from dating.
Wow.
So I have a little bit of a
okay, yeah. There's a
weird,
range of what makes
but it's
you
true that I
fun
wouldn't
at a party.
necessarily want to be the one to bring him, if that's
True. Okay, so
yeah, and
Schleiermacher.
Schleiermacher also,
Good
I
party.
like the way that he thinks about being a part of something and being in the world, in several senses.
You guys want to know something about NPR? So some of you may know that, oh wow, over 10 years ago now, I worked for an NPR member station. I was the marketing director at New Hampshire Public Radio. And I was actually really excited about that when I got that job, because I did listen to NPR. I did. And but I was never one of those people where I was like super into it. Like, there are people who are like obsessed with NPR. I was like, yeah, there are a couple good shows on NPR, and I liked listening to Car Talk. I mean, guilty. I like, who the fuck doesn't like Car Talk? Honestly, Car Talk was a great show. But like so I would listen to these like NPR, and I was like, I eventually like ended up becoming a marketing director at New Hampshire Public Radio. And let me tell you about NPR. NPR is so fucking dysfunctional in terms of how it operates that there are entire conferences within the public radio ecosystem for people who are not content creators, because I wasn't a content creator. I did marketing for them. There are entire conferences around how do you, as a non-content creator, get along with the content creators, because the journalists and the podcast hosts for NPR, they are all some of the most toxic, dysfunctional human beings that you have ever met in your life. And they're all fucking egomaniacs because they're like, on NPR, bro. Even though I'm pretty sure that I, on an average week, get actually more listeners than anyone at well, maybe the morning show at NHPR. But like, there are some shows at NHPR when I was working there as the marketing director, I 100% get more listeners every single week, like on my YouTube and Rumble and YouTube or X channels, than they did at NPR. But it doesn't have the prestige, does it? But I just always thought that was funny that like public and now of course it's being defunded, which I think is awesome. But I always thought it was funny that at public radio, which is supposed to be this very nice collegial environment, they actually had to train people how to get along with the content creators. And this is like it was like a nationwide problem where like this was a problem at every single NPR member station, because the content creators create such a toxic environment for literally everyone else.
So that's I do have I have a higher tolerance than some, it's true, for and tolerance isn't even the right word. I've learned a lot from a variety of different things.
Cherishing is what.
And I know, because I have a track record now, that there are at least some significant ways in which I'm not trying to produce students who think exactly like I do. I am far more interested in being interested than I am in having what's recognizable around me. That's just a feature, right? I'm much more interested in being surprised. I'm interested in being interested by something rather than everybody kind of being on the same page about things. And also because I think being on the same page about things is fake and,
Yeah, boring and probably not real.
Well, I just, one of the first things we talk about in class is that difficult problems are difficult. And if you think the solution to this difficult problem is something that's very simple, and if we just did this thing, then that would be, I am fairly certain it's not a solution.
Right.
Right?
Can I ask you about features a little bit? We're talking about the creatureliness of humanity and about finitude as an important thing to remember as we theologize. So why is a feature and not a bug when you talk about humanity and our life together?
Well, many visions, many utopic visions or visions of transformation, um, envision
Wait.
harmonious existence.
The new James Lindsay and company talking point is the woke right will become trans affirming socialists because the Hodge twins just had Blair White on. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. James has never actually been to like a real right wing dissident Twitter space before. James should come to the Christian Question Twitter spaces. I think that would be a really interesting experience for him.
Says a good bit of the content of that. I think that's quite challenging to envision, especially in terms of what I think it's very challenging to envision that on anything more than a relatively small scale level. And that in relatively small scale contexts, there are probably practices that allow for both a little bit of movement in and out and for a kind of transformation of certain kinds of antagonism or a submission of them to other kinds of practices or a kind of sideways movement of them or possibly an externalizing of them, right? Instead of having antagonism internally, you go after the people the next, whatever over. And so I think those dynamics are, without being meaningfully described as universal, pretty widespread. I think it's hard to live with other people. I do. And I'm interested then in what these utopic transformative practices mean and look like if I accept antagonism as a feature inside that.
I wonder how, if at all, does the Trinity feature in any of your thinking or writing in the sense of both difference and unity? Of course, it's it's come to us through the century through a very patriarchal lens, but I wonder if if this unity and difference held together somehow features in any way, or if you bump up against it and want to provide a different model.
Well, I did write a rather long and highly technical book on that question. My first book was, and when I say rather long and highly technical, believe me, those are descriptive statements. Because, of course, Trinitarian discourse is the kind where even if you're, you have to prove your fluency to be accepted in as a player. And I'm fluent. And that still did not prevent some but you put in these other things too. Therefore, I'm pretty sure you're not really a fluent speaker.
I
right?
mean, if I may, I think because you became fluent in Trinitarian technicality speak and then said, this language has some problems or this language could be improved.
Yeah, and I tried to show where, so, the queer theologian Marcella Altos-Reed talks about God's exchange rate mechanism, but she also talks about the kind of exchange rates or exchanges in theology where, theology becomes a kind of marketplace and so on. And from there and a few other sources, I took this idea of how theologians kind of make one thing into another through a series of kind of either substitutions or analogies or, language, of course, lives by images, right? The technical definitional aspects still have to be made vivid in relation and sometimes in distinction from quite specific images. They carry images with them. And so I'm also looking at how these moves kind of ramify across a theological field. And, I think, so that's one thing about what that book is about. But what I'd say in relation to the kind of point that you're making is that what difference unity can tolerate is the question that's not answered there. And that's the real question of that, right? And that, these ideas become so abstract at that point that in a way, what are we saying? And that I believe that in trying to use the Trinity in analogous ways, a lot of theologians in the second half of the 20th century ended up importing some problems that they thought pertained to human coexistence and sort of showing how God pre-solves those problems in God's own being.
Mm-hmm.
And I still have for God language, I am not wanting to do that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you think it's categorically the wrong move to try to backtrack into the Trinity what we want social answers to be?
Mostly, yeah. I call it corrective projectionism. There's this weird Lutheran side to me, right? So I have a very like pro-May, right? Like, what does God do for us?
Mm-hmm.
Rather than, how can I see myself in God or something like
Yeah.
that? And, that's, I take image of God language and especially its significance to the history of the tradition rather than to biblical languages quite seriously. But I also think there's so much else, right? And that it's, as I understand it, and I know many people see this very differently, but as I understand it, the interest in God is, does God change things for us in any way? Not, does God share my struggles? Even if the changing might include within it, as I think it does, a certain kind of sharing of struggles. But for me, I think that sharing is just not particularly meaningful without the changing.
Yeah, as long as we're talking about changing, I can remember my very first class at YDS was Queer Theology with Letty Russell. And it was incredibly destabilizing, having come from a very traditional Roman Catholic background. And it took me the better part of the semester to go, oh, I think I understand what you're trying to offer to me. And I think there's actually a lot of joy and hope here that I was not able to see. But the process of learning for me and encountering queer theology was destabilizing, to say the least. Angry, like, what have I been given? You're critiquing me. You're critiquing everything right. And I'm really thankful for that experience. And I wonder how do you work with the destabilization that you see in your students in the classroom? Because it's necessary. It's part of learning, growing, and the transformation we're talking about. And there's more at stake there when that happens versus, I don't know, a standard history class where I'm just kind of learning maybe some facts of history. So,
oh yeah, I mean, these are real. These tend to be without, these things can happen in many kinds of classrooms, but this is a particular kind of classroom that tends to bring in a rather more concentrated, right, like selection of folks who have some of those desires and fears, I suppose, too, in some ways. And it is an incredibly difficult course to teach, and I never know how it's going to be difficult before the semester starts. Each and every time I've done it since the first time in, I think, 2013, has been difficulties I didn't anticipate.
Wow.
No matter what. I did not see that was going to be the place where the difficulty would emerge. So one thing is I've sort of given up on building in, right, like defenses against all difficulties, because I do not see them in advance. I did not know that was going to be the way that this.
Wow.
But I also try to be comfortable with that, right? And to I'm less, I'm also not actively trying to destabilize, even though I understand that will likely happen, as it has for me in many cases, and that I have valued greatly what has happened when I've learned that I thought in ways that I no longer want to think, or maybe even ways that were really wrong about something. It's painful in the moment, but it's so freeing in the long run. And it is a way of staying with things that I think is really important. I'll even talk with students who want to stay in school about how you have to find it desirable that other people know more than you do. Because choosing to stay in school means choosing to be around an increasingly select, narrowed group of people who know more than you do about just about anything. And in fact, everything cumulatively, right? And if you don't like that, this might not be the right environment, right? And then, of course, the first time I read Marcel Althaus-Reid, for example, who I still think of as the most important queer theologian for various reasons, I don't know if I should use this word, but I thought it was kind of BS, right? Like I was like, this is not rigorously worked through enough. It's not, it's too associative. It's too sideways. And then I read her real hard for a long time, and came to understand what she was doing quite differently than that. But I still remember what it felt like to have that reaction.
That's so.
So can I ask this question? You used a word that has come up for me a lot, and I've been thinking a lot about it. Rigor.
Yeah.
I know there's a whole iceberg underneath that word. Both.
What the fuck does Hamas have to do with any of this? What is Hamas? Frank, this is for you. I want an answer from you explicitly. I'm stopping the stream. What does Hamas have to do with any of what we are watching? We're waiting, Frank. We're waiting for your answer. What does Hamas have to do with any of this? We're waiting. What does Hamas have to do with any of this? Frank, you have 30 seconds to answer me. I'm going to permanently ban you from my chat. No, it doesn't. No, it doesn't. What does Hamas have to do with what we are watching right now? Do you even know what we're watching right now? Do you know what anything that's going on right now? Or you just decided to come in and pontificate in my chat about something that has nothing to fucking do with what we're watching right now? So you're going to try one more time. And if you don't, I'm permanently banning you from my chat. Because if I can expect that you're just going to come in, pontificate about conservative talking point bullshit that literally has nothing to do with anything except whatever conservative narrative you're hearing on Fox News today, I don't want that shit around. So Frank, you have one more time, one more chance before I permanently ban you from my chat. What does Hamas have to do with any of this? All right, yes is your answer. All right, yes, you are banned. Goodbye.
Probably some beautiful aspects and maybe some pieces you might want to let go of if you've noticed yourself let go of. You tell me. But there's like we often, especially around here, there's no rigor, and we use that to mean it doesn't look a certain way. So say more.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I am very invested in rigor. That's true. Very. I'm constantly trying to expand my understanding of what rigor means and what it looks like without giving up the idea of it.
Yeah.
I think we make a huge mistake if we give up because, another word for rigor is it is a site where intentionality has been deposited. You're doing things on purpose. You're doing them in some sense for reasons, and reasons can mean a really wide array of things here, but you're doing them on purpose in some sense. And, I again, as the kind of theological thinker that I tend to be, I don't think we have a lot of transparency in ourselves, but I still think that doing things in some sense on purpose is part of the practices of engaging with each other. And rigor is a way to talk about a highly refined doing of that. Now, of course, has it been used mistakenly as a cudgel against me on occasion? Absolutely, right?
And in things like the
Because-
Trinitarian language games.
Mhm, absolutely.
If you break the rules.
And I just I'm okay with having that fight.
Mhm.
I will fight for my understanding of rigor and have done so on more than one occasion. And inside the terms of the understanding of rigor that is being directed at me, to also, I think, show its limitations. And
Yes.
that is also interesting.
That is.
Yeah. But I do think we make a mistake when we cede rigor. I recognize many people.
All right, I think this is boring.
Memoir as the closing assignment.
Whoa.
So folks are
And I just accidentally rewound it anyway. I think this is boring, but we're going to go back. We're going to watch another talk by this person because they're not really saying anything in that talk. So I want to go back and I want to watch this talk from 11 years ago. Faculty Conversations, Challenging Unjust Laws in Church and Society. Let's see what they had to say 11 years ago. Let's see what happened then.
Morning, everyone, and welcome to YDS, or I assume in many cases, welcome back to Yale Divinity School. I am Jennifer Hurt. Good morning. Thank you. Welcome. I am Jennifer Hurt. I'm the Associate Dean for Academic Affairs as of this fall here at YDS. I'm also a Professor of Christian Ethics, and I'm delighted to welcome you to this opening faculty conversation on challenging unjust laws in church and society. I'm going to introduce our two faculty conversants this morning, and then we'll have some opening comments from Tom Ogletree, and then a conversation between Linn Tonstad and...
No, we're fast forwarding. We're not going through the opening comments. We're going to fast forward. It's going to be fine. Oh, Tom talked for a while.
By challenging an unjust law. So that's what we're about.
Everyone's just going to have to deal with the volume. I can't control how loud it is.
So thank you for that beautiful and succinct discussion of some of the challenges facing us structurally and denominationally in thinking about these issues. Now, as a systematic theologian who also works in queer theology, I can't help but want us to talk a little bit about the theological issues at stake.
Oh, really?
Yeah, no, totally unexpected, right? So debates in Christianity over sexuality tend to take similarly bankrupt forms on both sides of the issue, right? Opponents of the full participation of queer persons in the lives of the churches tend to tear sexuality out of historical context, proof texting at us, and so on and so forth, whereas proponents of the full participation of queer persons in the lives of churches tend to respond by some sort of anemic assertions about the differences between sexuality now and then, and something about God's love for everybody. And so everybody thinks they've addressed the issue, having done so, of course, in no particular whatsoever, talking completely past each other. How do we start developing resources for thinking in better theological ways about these issues? How do we move past the question about whether homosexuality ought to be lumped in with rape and incest or whatever the case might be? And how do we take more seriously the kinds of theological questions that are at stake here about how we draw boundaries around who counts as a...
We're going to start implementing a new rule. If you want to make fun of how one of these people looks, you can do that. But in exchange for that, you need to make an observation that actually matters. You need to prove that you're actually listening to what's going on. And in addition to making fun of them for how they look, you need to make an observation about what they're saying and the content of the discussion that actually matters. And if you don't do that, then you don't get to insult their looks. I think that's a good and fair rule because again, this is one of those things where they have stupid hair and I don't like their outfit. Do you know how fucking retarded that sounds to me? Do you know how stupid that sounds? I don't think I'm asking too much.
Religious insider.
Yeah, or you can pay me money. That's also a good idea, Gary. Or you can pay me money.
Yeah, I think that's a critical issue, obviously. And of course, when people said, what do the scriptures say? And what's intriguing is that you have a hard time finding some. So people search and search, and there are about 6 clusters that people have found. And this is proof texting, of course, where you're looking for text that you can use to justify the beliefs you already hold. You're not opening yourself up to scripture. And I said, well, then if you are so convinced, these texts don't talk about homosexuality. They talk about lust out of control, like rape, incest, and then they talk about sodomy, but it's all just lumped together as kind of sex out of control. Well, none of us are advocating sex out of control. That's not the issue here. So I'm saying those texts don't really help us here unless you read them in a sort of self-interested way. But if you want to cite scripture, then there's a much stronger biblical case for polygamy. Yeah, we could support polygamy.
What?
So what's intriguing is that
Oh yeah, do they? We'll have to check that out,
but
Connor.
if you want to
Thank
find
you.
a group of texts that seem to be pertinent to the justice and well-being, there are hundreds and hundreds of them that talk about the inclusion of all people, the care for those who are vulnerable, who are sick, who are poor, who are abused. And of course, that's Jesus' message. In fact, the poor opponents of gay marriage can't find anything that Jesus said that helps their case. Isn't that terrible? In fact, I sometimes joke that, well, who was this beloved disciple? What did that mean? Was Jesus gay? I said, you can make that case as well as you can make some of the cases you're making. But
Okay, as a reminder, because this was 11 years ago, this was before gay marriage was legalized.
because his mission was to include. No one is unclean. No one should be cast out as unworthy. You're welcome us
I'm going
all.
to turn my
We're
mic down a little
all
bit.
on a pilgrimage. And so, sure, gay and lesbians are sinners just like those of us who are so-called straight.
So-called
We're
straight.
on a path of growing in faith and nurturing. So we've all got things to learn, but let's recognize here that these are people claiming their own dignity. In fact, I love the growing.
They don't look a certain way. You think they look a certain way because you watch clickbait outrage content rather than actual leftist content. So they don't look a certain way. That's not true. Does this look like a queer activist to you? Does he look like he has pink hair and is dressing weird and has weird tattoos? Like, when they do have those weird looks, it's because they're making a political statement. But to say that they all look that way is just profoundly retarded.
Evidence that sexual orientation is genetic. So it's not a choice. And I've certainly learned that. I knew when my son was experiencing this and an older daughter who's lesbian, they didn't choose this. They had to come to a sense of who they were as they were growing up. And my job as a father was to help them do that and to help them know that you are a wonderful person. And I'm so proud of what they've achieved and what their lives are about, because they are both really committed to fostering a more just and open and inclusive society. That's their vision. So they're not just pushing their own interests. They're trying to reach out and care for others and their well-being. So they inspire me. I'm proud of them.
I bet they're very grateful to have you for a father. So I wonder, though, if that
And a mother, too. She's wonderful.
I wonder, though, if that raises one of the challenges in the ways that we think and speak about sexuality in relation to the question of identity.
Yeah.
Because on the one hand, for opponents of the full participation of queer persons in the life of the church, there's an absolute stumbling block laid down in Jesus's own words, and that has to do with adultery being sin in the heart, right? That rules out the possibility of making the distinction between orientation and practice, right? It makes the language of practicing homosexual completely irrelevant in Christian terms because Jesus refuses that distinction. The question is attraction, not practice. And on the other hand, when persons who
Okay, this is the problem with you, and you've been around long enough to now know better. I answered your question specifically. You said, why do they all look stupid? And I said, they don't all look stupid. And if you watch the left for any period of time at all, you know they don't look stupid because you see them on the screen. And you said, but some of them look stupid. And it's just like, did you actually want an answer to the question? Do you actually want to learn anything? Or are you just here to own the libs? because you've watched enough episodes on my channel now where you have watched video after video after video after video of most of them looking completely fuck off normal. And yet you come here like, I just don't understand why they all look stupid. That is what you said. That is what you said explicitly. And you're not taking in the information I'm giving you. And it really pisses me off when I take the time to answer people's questions and they immediately start arguing with me. So either you're here to learn or go own the libs somewhere else, because you've been around long enough now that you absolutely know better.
Support of the full participation of the lives of
I'll turn my
queer
mic
persons
down,
in the lives
sorry.
of the churches tend to talk about identity. There's a couple of challenges that come up in that regard. Inside queer theoretical circles, the question of homosexuality as identity is probably about as contested as any question could be. It's a way of potentially accepting.
Hang on. What did this person just say? Do we have captions for this? This person, I'll try to turn the browser volume up. This person just said that homosexuality as an identity is questioned in queer circles.
Because Jesus refuses that distinction. The question is attraction, not practice. And on the other hand, when persons who are in support of the full participation of the lives of queer persons in the lives of the churches tend to talk about identity, there's a couple of challenges that come up in that regard. Inside queer theoretical circles, the question of homosexuality as identity is probably about as contested as any question could be.
Homosexuality as an identity is contested within queer circles? Wow. Because homosexuality has nothing to do with being queer at all? You don't say.
It's a way of potentially accepting the status of a question where we've produced these identities in the process of debating about them. Some queer theorists argue that the production of sexuality as identity is a function of distracting us in some ways.
Wow.
From issues like poverty, like economic violence, like severe structural injustices.
Talking about sexuality, specifically homosexuality as an identity, is just a distraction from talking about all the oppressions created by capitalism. Do you guys understand this? That's the argument being made. Talking about homosexuality, and again, this was before gay marriage was legalized. This person is a queer Marxist. We've seen over and over and over again, queer Marxists were not in favor of the legalization of gay marriage. They didn't want it legalized. They thought it was an assimilationist strategy. So this queer Marxist, who was back then also a divinity professor at Yale, is saying, it is a waste of time to talk about homosexuality as an identity because we should be talking about the oppressions created by capitalism.
It, in a sense, makes us concerned about personal practices and preferences, and we read those as somehow immutable in the human person. Now, there's a lot of questionable assumptions about the human person that are entailed in that. On the other hand, the moment we stake our claim on identity, we raise some problems for one of the acronyms in the alphabet soup, right? GLBTQ, the B, right? The question of whether you could change if you wanted to change, or whether if, for instance, for those of us who are bisexual, the question of change isn't really the question at all. How do we move past this sort of stuckness around issues of identity? The same thing can be seen then in debates over political issues, the political status of same-sex marriage. Now, that has, of course, become one of the flagship issues of the contemporary gay rights movement. But that, too, is the source of a lot of debate inside queer political activist circles, because it seems to indicate a sort of privatization that's happened
Privatization.
after the more radical proposals that happened during and in response to the AIDS crisis, where
Act
poverty,
Up.
structural injustice, homelessness, violence against queer persons, societal indifference to queer persons took priority over the desire to gain.
See, the thing is, had you actually been listening and not just owning the libs the entire chat, you would know that this person right now is talking about the evolution of the ACT UP movement. The ACT UP movement was in the 80s going against Ronald Reagan and trying to get him to talk about AIDS as part of their political agenda. The ACT UP movement evolved into militant queer activism, which is bashed back by the 2000s, and that is where the violence comes from. So perhaps I would would suggest that if you actually want to understand this stuff, you should do a little bit more listening and a little bit less dunking on the looks and the glasses and the voice that you don't like in the chat, because the reason that you don't understand this right now is because you haven't been listening. Dunking on the libs is all fine, well, and good until you can't answer basic questions because you weren't listening to the information.
Bartel writes, how would you think about the ethical issues that are entailed in how we prioritize our activism in different directions?
Oh, for
and how we
fuck's
think
sake.
about personal identity from a Christian perspective?
Well, what of course is important about this is that all of those issues matter. And naturally, we face that problem all the time. We're finite. We can't just take on every problem in the world. So we have to decide what can be priorities, where we can make a difference. But I was impressed, for example, with the Massachusetts court ruling. In fact, I hadn't read it thoroughly until my son wanted it to be read at his wedding.
All right. Do you guys want me to keep going? Do you want me to keep the stream going, or do you want me to end the stream? In fact, you know what? No, I'm just going to end the stream. I'm stream over, stream done, stream over. I'm tired of hearing people complain in the chat. I'm tired of seeing the dunking on the libs. I'm tired of there being no significant contributions. I'm tired of it. It's only Monday. I've got other shit to do. And so I'm ending the stream. Nope. I've already decided. I'm ending the stream. Stream over. This is what happens when people complain. This is what happens when people complain over and over and over again. This is what happens when people don't listen over and over and over again. This is what happens when people in the chat just spend the whole time dunking on the libs. You drive me fucking insane, and then I cancel the stream. So if you want the stream to continue longer in the future, maybe don't do that, or you guys can self-police the chat and tell people who are doing it to shut the fuck up. Those are your options. But for right now, I'm ending the stream. For supporters, I will be back in about 45 minutes, and we will do Spy Stream, and this is going to be supporter exclusive. And the nice thing about supporter exclusive Spy Stream is that no one fucking complains. Do you know why no one complains on supporter exclusive Spy Stream? Because people are actually paying to be there. So no one complains, everyone listens, and we get rid of a whole lot of nonsense. So if you are a member on my Substack, my Locals, my Patreon, Twitter subscribers, or YouTube channel membership, you are invited to a supporter-exclusive Spy Stream that's going to start around 7:45 tonight. We're going inside a live DSA organizing call. It's going to be pretty great. And you know, maybe if you don't want streams to be cut short, don't fucking complain over and over and over again, because I don't like to hear it. It's annoying. So that's what we're going to be doing, guys. I'm going to go take a break, and I will see you guys a little bit later. Bye.
How are you feeling? How long have you been here?
3 months, May 17th.
And what brought you?
That's difficult to answer.
Would you give me some idea? trying to do with your life?
Play the piano for the people.
I'm not clear. How is it that playing the piano for people has eventually resulted in your being here in the hospital?
That's difficult to answer.